KCIA, Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sams.
And I'm Victoria Robinson, here sitting in for Tim's story. It's always a pleasure.
Sitting in?
I am sitting and speaking in. I mean, what do you want me to say?
What about standing in?
Because I'm sitting.
Well, I've always wondered what that, well, at any rate.
I'm really excited about this interview, David. Number one, you guys
What are we doing in it today?
We're talking to Wink Martindale, who's been a friend of yours for over 3 decades.
By the way, do you know Wink's real name?
I think maybe I'm about to find out.
No, I should say his nickname is the Winker.
Oh, that was probably easy.
We're talking about an American icon, one of the greatest game show hosts of all television history, and one of the greatest voices, one of the most recognizable voices. Even though Wink is in his 80s today, he has kept that muscle up. He still does voiceovers. He still does commercials. You've probably seen him on some commercials.
Isn't it interesting? There's some voices in the country that you hear and automatically know who they are. Casey Kasem.
Right.
What's that real deep? His name is just escaping me. Love his voice. He did Star Wars stuff. That guy. People know who I'm talking about. And then Wink Martindale. All right, I blew that.
No. I'll give you a hint. Give you a hint. This is CNN. I can't do it.
Lou somebody, right?
No. Oh, come on. You know who you're talking
What's his
about.
initials?
You know what? I'm going to let you think about it while you cannot Google it.
Okay.
I'm going to give you about a few minutes to think about it while I'm talking to Wink.
Okay.
All right. And I'm going to see if your brain can work. If your brain can kick in.
It's not my brain, it's my tongue, because it's right there on the tip. Maybe if I look in the mirror, I'll know.
So let's go to the interview with Wink Martindale while you are trying to get it together, okay?
Sounds like a plan.
Here we go. Wink, my friend, it's so good to see you.
Always good to see you, my friend.
When we first started working together, I had jet black hair, and
didn't we all?
We were on a roll, weren't we? You've always been on a roll, though. It's there's no stopping for you. Is that part of the secret to your success, and that is you just don't stop?
I think that it's the love of the business. I feel very blessed. I got started when I was 17 years old, and I've always worked to this day. I still get requests for my work, and I don't know. I feel like the Lord has blessed me with an instrument that I can convey my feelings to the world, to the business community, to the entertainment community, and it started a long time ago, and it's still going on.
I played the other day something that you had recorded for us. What do you call those when you're talking out a song?
Narrative.
Okay. I played one of those the other day. Your hit back in when was it? The 50s?
1959.
59. What was it?
Deck of Cards.
Deck of Cards. You can barely tell the difference in your voice.
You know what, David? Let me tell you something. I hear that a lot from people. I can take a piece of tape that I did, let's say it's a commercial that I did during the 70s when I worked for Gene Autry at KMPC on his flagship station here in Los Angeles. And I can take a piece of tape today and record that same commercial and interject it, cut it here, put it in here, and you can't tell the difference. You can't tell from the 70s to now. And usually as you age, your voice starts to, go down a notch here and there. But my voice to this day, and I think it's a God-given gift, is really and truly, like you say, the same as it was 20, 30 years ago.
Take me back just a little bit. Take me down memory lane a little bit, because you started out in radio. Was that something that you just had a love for from day one, or did you stumble into it?
No, David, from the time I was old enough to know what a microphone was, from the day I was old enough to know what a little radio was, I was fascinated. The fact that you could talk into this thing and it would come out on the other end, it was a total fascination to me. So I think that I became totally consumed by the idea of being, quote unquote, on the radio when I was 7 or 8 or 9 years old. Always wanted to be on the radio. So it's something I always wanted to do, and God gave me the will to go forward with it. I feel, again, so blessed because so many of us get up and go to work every day hating what we do. I've been lucky in that regard. I know you have been lucky in that regard because you love what you do, and it's so easy to do what we do when we like it, when we truly enjoy what our mode of making a living is.
At what point did you discover what your purpose in life was going to be?
Well, I would have to say that when I was 9 years old, I used to tear out the pages in Life magazine and go into the back bedroom, close the door, and pretend I was on the radio. I would take these advertisements and ad lib around them. So I learned to, first of all, I got a feel about how to sell, per se, and I learned how to ad lib around what was written there on those pages. And my brothers and my sister thought I was nuts. My mother never made fun of me, but they did. But even then, I knew that I wanted to be on the radio. Now, Fade to Black had come up on a few years later, and my Sunday school teacher at Lamb Memorial Church, Chick Wingate, my mentor, also was general manager of the 250 water in Jackson, Tennessee. We had 3 stations, 250, 1,000 water, and a 5,000 water. So he ran the little one. And I used to bug Chick all the time. And Chick, when are you going to give me a job? I want to be on the radio. Give me a job. And he got so tired of hearing me say this, whether we were at church or where I'd run into him. When are you going to give me a job? So one night we're on, every little town has its court square. And I'm sitting there with Dickie Bear and Charlie Pate, 2 of my high school football playing buddies. It's a hot summer night. We're sitting there on the railing by the First National Bank building, and up comes this little Henry J., and there's Chick Wingate. He's going to go up to the 4th floor where the station was located and do something. And I said, Chick, when are you going to give me? He said, will you shut it? Come on. So we got in the elevator and went up to the 4th floor of the First National Bank building where WPLI was located. He tore some news copy off the machine, gave me a couple of commercials to read, put me in front of a microphone, and put me on a piece of tape. Little did he know that I was going to go through those like Grant going through Richmond, because I'd been practicing for a long time. Mm-hmm. Well, I blew him away. So I did those commercials and read that news without any hesitation whatsoever. And he said, you come down here tomorrow after school, and I'll have the mayor here. Mayor George Smith owned the station. He said, Mayor Smith will be here, and he will hear you do these. You do this, and I think you'll have a job. So I did. After school, came down, did it for Mayor Smith. He gave me a job, $25 a week, and that was my start in radio. I was 17 years old.
Wow. I was listening to some of your audiobooks. I know that you were eventually the morning disc jockey there, right? And I love the story about the first time Elvis went on the air there, that you were the guy that had to go find Elvis and bring him back to the station.
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
My dream was to be on radio and do the morning show at the #1 station in Memphis, WHBQ, 5,000 watts. Came into Jackson, my hometown, like a local. And all us kids used to listen to WHBQ radio because they played more music than anybody else. Now, Fade to Black had come up on the summer of 1954. I had been working at WHBQ a little over a year at that time. And at night, we had a DJ by the name of Dewey Phillips. I had to play Patty Page and Barry Como and Joe Stafford and Kay Starr. At night, he would play all of these black artists with chess records out of Chicago and all of those artists like the Drifters and Johnny Lee Hooker and Lowell Fulsom and people like that. He was playing black music for white kids. He had 65% of the audience at night from 9 to midnight. Okay, one night in the summer of 54, I happened to be at the station showing some of my buddies around the radio station, some of my buddies from Jackson. And I heard a commotion in the control room. Switchboard lit up, and I said, excuse me, guys, I'm going to see what's going on. So I went into Dewey Phillips' studio, where he was doing Red Hot and Blue. Sam Phillips, who founded Sun Records, had walked in, unbeknownst to me, and handed Dewey a record to play called That's All Right, Mama, by a truck-driving singer He drove a truck for Crown Electric. He was going to be an electrician. Well, he went in and made a record for his mom one day called My Happiness to give her for her birthday, a $4 record. Sam liked what he heard, kept his name on record, and about a year after he made that My Happiness record, he called him back down, put him together with Scotty Moore and Bill Black, and they worked together until Sam heard something he liked. And That's All Right Mama. So here it is, summer 54. Dewey puts that on the radio, plays it 7 times in a row. People couldn't get enough of it. They went over and over and over again. That was beginning of Presley Mania. I was the one that was designated to call Gladys and Vernon. They lived in low-rent housing called Lauderdale Courts out in East Memphis, no longer there. But I called, and Mrs. Presley answered the phone, and she and her husband were both listening to the show because they knew it was going to be played on the radio that night. I said, Miss Presley, where's Elvis? Dewey would like him to come down to the Chisca Hotel where we were located on South Main Street, and he wants to put him on the air. She said, well, he was so nervous about it, he went to see a double feature Western at the Azores Theater over on Decatur Street. So they said, we'll go get him and bring him down there. So they had a truck. They got in their truck, went down to the Azores, and walked up and down the aisle. There was Elvis sitting in the middle of a row all by himself watching this Western. They whispered to him about the excitement. They got in the truck, went down to WHBQ where we were all waiting. He walked in the control room, and he sat down in front of a microphone. And Dewey Phillips started talking to him. And I remember after it was all over, Elvis said, I thought you were going to interview me. He said, I just did. And he often said in later interviews, Elvis said, had he known he was being interviewed on the air, he would have been so nervous he couldn't talk.
Right.
So it's good the way it all turned out. But I was one who made the call. There were 6 of us in the control room that night, the night that Presley Mania began. Sam Phillips, Dewey Phillips, Gladys and Vernon, Elvis, and me. And I'm the only one living who was there that night.
Wow.
I feel blessed to have been a part of Presley Mania. And then in the 60s, when I became a rock jock in L.A., I was part of Beatlemania. And then in the 70s, I was part of the
Disco.
Yeah. Couldn't think of the word disco. So,
it's getting bad when we forget about disco, right?
And I was even part of the late, the tail end of the big bands in the late 40s, So, again, I feel blessed.
You went from Memphis to Hollywood. Tell me about what that was like, that transition.
Well, I had decided by 1958 that I had gone just about as far as I could in radio in Memphis. I'd been, for Memphis, enormously successful. I had the number 1 morning show on radio. I had gotten started on television when Channel 13 went on the air there with a show called Wink Martindale of the Mars Patrol, where I did interviews with little 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. We drank our Bosco and milk and then blasted off into space, segueing into those old Rocky Jones Space Ranger C movies they used to call serials on Saturday afternoon between the features. And then when Dick Clark became popular with American Bandstand, I was sort of the Dick Clark of Memphis. I segued out of Mars Patrol into Top 10 Dance Party, a 90-minute show on Saturday for Coca-Cola, like American Bandstand. And it was on that show, by the way, in 1956 that Elvis did his first recorded interview on tape. And by 58, I just felt like I'd gone just about as far as I could. And I went to my mentor, Bill Grumbles, who had hired me at WHBQ. I was sort of his boy. He was always very proud of me and what I'd accomplished. And I said, I remember I went into his office, plush office there at Channel 13, and I said, Mr. Grumbles, I didn't know what his reaction was going to be. I didn't know he was going to throw me out of the office, get mad, or what. And I explained I'd like to try to spread my wings. And he understood. He picked up the phone. He called Norm Boggs, who was general manager of KHJ-TV in Los Angeles. So Norm Boggs answered the phone, and Mr. Grumbles said, I've got a young man here in my office who's done a tremendous job for us. He wants to spread his wings. He has visions of Malibu and palm trees. And to make a long story short, Norm Boggs said, send him out. And I remember Bill Grumbles hung up the phone, and this is what a redneck I was. Mm-hmm. He hung up the phone, and the first thing I said was, Mr. Reynolds, what is Malibu? I had no idea what he was talking about. So that's how much I knew about California. So in March of 1959, I was transferred from WHBQ Radio in Memphis to KHJ Radio and TV in Los Angeles. And that's the way I got started out here. And I remember, David, and you've experienced this too in more than one city, when you fly into LA at night, as I did that night in 1959, and you go for miles and miles and miles of lights and freeways and lights. And I turned to Mark Forrester, my program director, who flew out with me, and I said, Mark, what if I don't make it and I have to go back to Memphis with my tail between, he said something I never forgot, David. He said, Wink, don't worry about that. He said, people are people wherever you go. LA is a megalopolis. People in Memphis are just like the people out here. You just do what you're used to doing, be you, and you'll be fine. And he was right. And it's something I've never forgotten.
Those moments are so magical that you just never get out of your mind. I remember a couple of days before we launched Oprah in 86, we all had dinner in Chicago. There were about 10 of us, I guess. And I remember Oprah sitting right across from me at dinner, and she leaned over to me and she says, David, do you think it's going to work?
And it worked big time.
So when you came to LA, that was a magical time in the business too. I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, color TV hadn't even hit. That was going to hit 3 or 4 years later.
That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were at the right place at the right time.
And I mentioned what 1959 meant to me.
Yeah.
I came out here, had my own radio show. By that summer, I had my own teenage dance party show like I had had in Memphis at Pacific Ocean Park down in Santa Monica, which was a big deal at the time. And that became a huge success. And it just so happens that while I was in Memphis, Randy Wood was a guest on my show in Memphis on a Saturday afternoon, the man who founded Dot Records. We went to dinner that night, and he said, how would you like to make records for Dot? And I didn't claim to be a singer, but I'd made a couple of local records when everybody thought they could be the next Elvis Presley, So I lip-synced that on the show that day, and he kind of liked it. So at dinner, he said, how would you like to be on Dot? And I thought I was over the moon. I said, are you kidding? He paid $25,000 for my contract with OJ Records in Memphis, and he signed me to Dot. He said, we won't be in a hurry. He knew I was coming to L.A. sooner rather than later. He said, let me look for something special for you, and we won't be in a hurry. So I came out in March of 59, and by September, I got off the air one morning at KHJ. Phone was ringing. It was Randy Wood's secretary, Fran Kirk. I don't know how. Sometimes I forget my own name, and isn't it funny? You remember what you want to remember, and you forget what you want to forget.
Yeah. Fran
Kirk called and said, "Wink." They called me Winky. Winky, Randy would like for you to come to his office. He wants to play something for you. So I couldn't wait to get. We were on Vine Street, and he was above Wallach's Music City at Hollywood and Vine, and so I hurried up the street, went upstairs at Dot Records, and I kept thinking, this is the man who gave Pat Boone his start, and the Hilltoppers, and Billy Vaughn, and Johnny Maddox, and all these people. He had a lot of million sellers by that time. So he had something he wanted me to play here. And so he put on this old 78 RPM scratchy record on Star Day Records. It was by a guy named T. Texas Tyler. And it was not a song, it was a narrative about a soldier who used a deck of cards in church during World War II because he didn't have a Bible. The ace was one God, the deuce was the Old and New Testament. It went right on through the Bible like that. And I remember thinking about halfway through listening to that scratchy record, what am I going to say when he takes the needle off? Am I going to say, I don't know, Randy. I was determined I was going to tell him that I loved it. Although I was thinking kids buy records. Stagger Lee was number 1. Venus by Frankie Avalon was number 2. You had Mac the Knife by Bobby Darin. And I'm listening to a semi-religious talking record. Yeah. Who's going to buy that?
Yeah.
But believe me, when he took the needle off, What do you think, Wink? I said, Randy, I love it. We went into a studio in about 3 weeks, and master recorders, and had the Jack Halloran singers sing behind me, doing the choral. So we made sort of a pop version of this old country song by narrative by T. Texas Tyler. And I really didn't see much hope for it. I thought it was an interesting story. And as a believer, I loved what it said, but I thought, again, what kid's going to buy this? So it comes out. Nothing happens. It just lays there. Until one morning, it was in around the first or second week in October, I get another call. This time from Christine Hamilton, the sales manager for Dot. Winky, we just got an order. 10,000 of your records out of Boston. And I said, like the redneck I was, is that good? She said, is that good? She said, if we got 10,000 orders for every record we put out, we'd be the biggest record company in the world. So it so happens that Bob Clayton, who was the number one DJ in Boston, Massachusetts, just happened to, I don't know how he found it or why, put it on the turntable and played it once, and the switchboard lit up. And from that radio station in Boston, just swept the country. And every station, every time they'd play it, it would get the same reaction. It was the right thing at the right time. And by November, it had sold almost 1 million. I got a call from Mickey Addy, who was the Dot representative in New York, telling Randy that Ed Sullivan wanted me to do it on the Ed Sullivan Show. So it was like an out-of-body experience. I had grown up, watching Ed Sullivan and the Toast of the Town, and now all of a sudden I'm going to be on that stage doing Deck of Cards. And and by then it was, after I did it on the Ed Sullivan Show, it went over 1 million real fast. And you mentioned Tony Bennett earlier. The next day, since I was in New York, Mickey Addy said, let's go around to the stations and do some promo work. I said, great. So we went to WINS in New York. And we went into the record library, and over in the corner was Tony Bennett. He was there, talking to the record library, and he saw me, and rather than me walking up to him and bowing and saying how much, of a fan I've been over the years. I was playing Tony Bennett's Because of You and Cold, Cold Heart when I was a first-year jock in Jackson, Tennessee as a kid. And all of a sudden, I'm face-to-face with him, and he says to me, Wink, I saw you on Sullivan last night. You were great. And I thought, what's wrong with this picture? Tony Bennett is telling me I'm great. But again, isn't it amazing? I remember that like it was yesterday. And I'm talking about 1959.
Let's listen to a Deck of Cards.
Let's do it.
During the North African campaign, a bunch of soldier boys had been on a long hike, and they arrived in a little town called Casino. The next morning being Sunday, several of the boys went to church. A sergeant commanded the boys in church, and after the chaplain had read the prayer, the text was taken up next. Those of the boys who had a prayer book took them out. But this one boy had only a deck of cards, and so he spread them out. The sergeant saw the cards and said, "Soldier, put away those cards." After the service was over, the soldier was taken prisoner and brought before the provost marshal. The marshal said, "Sergeant, why have you brought this man here?" "For playing cards in church, sir." "And what have you got to say for yourself, son?" "Much, sir," replied the soldier. The marshal said, "Well, I hope so. For if not, I shall punish you more than any man was ever punished." The soldier said, "Sir, I've been on the march for about 6 days. I had neither Bible nor prayer book, but I hope to satisfy you, sir, with the purity of my intentions." And with that, the boy started his story. You see, sir, when I look at the ace, it reminds me there is but one God. And the deuce reminds me that the Bible is divided into 2 parts, the Old and the New Testaments. When I see the tray, I think of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And when I see the 4, I think of the 4 evangelists who preached the gospel. There was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And when I see the 5, It reminds me of the 5 wise virgins who trimmed their lamps. There were 10 of them. 5 were wise and were saved. 5 were foolish and were shut out. When I see the 6, it reminds me that in 6 days God made this great heaven and earth. When I see the 7, it reminds me that on the 7th day God rested from his great work. And when I see the 8, I think of the 8 righteous persons God saved when he destroyed this earth. There was Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, and their wives. And when I see the 9, I think of the lepers our Savior cleansed, and 9 out of the 10 didn't even thank him. When I see the 10, I think of the 10 commandments God handed down to Moses on a table of stone. When I see the king, it reminds me there is but one King of heaven, God Almighty. And when I see the queen, I think of the Blessed Virgin Mary, who is Queen of heaven, and the jack or knave is the devil. When I count the number of spots on a deck of cards, I find 365, the number of days in a year. There are 52 cards, the number of weeks in a year. There are 4 suits, the number of weeks in a month. There are 12 picture cards, the number of months in a year. There are 13 tricks, the number of weeks in a quarter. So you see, sir, my pack of cards serves me as a Bible, an almanac, and a prayer book. And friends, this story is true. I know, for I was that soldier.
So after Deck of Cards, did you get the bug to make more records?
So when we had the single deck of cards, Randy naturally wanted to do an album of narrative hits titled Deck of Cards. And in addition to the hit, we did Melody of Love, we did Steal Away, which had been a big hit for Red Foley, Just a Closer Walk with Thee, The Shifting Whispering Sands, which had been a big hit for Billy Vaughn and Ken Nordine, things like that. And that album turned out to be a big hit based on the hit single Deck of Cards. And, you know, you can't keep doing narrative talking records. So we would go in every now and then. And by then I was taking some voice lessons. Randy sent me to New York to study with Carlo Menotti, who was Pat Boone's voice coach. And I was back there for a couple of weeks. So I've never professed to be a singer, but I did have 2 or 3 things that did fairly well. I did an album of duets with Robin Ward on Dot, and it did very well. And I had one singing record, which did about 500,000. I found out that after Deck of Cards, it wasn't quite as easy to have a number 1 hit.
You're one of the most prolific game show hosts of all time. How in the world did you get into the game show business?
Well, in 1965, when I was morning man at KFWB, I had gotten to the point where I was kind of tired of playing rock and roll records, and I thought I wanted to be out of radio, and I wanted to try television, because every day I'd get off the air, have breakfast downstairs at a coffee shop, and I would run home to watch Password with Alan Ludden. I became addicted to Password. And so I did some research, and I discovered that Alan Ludden would go in 2 days a week, knock out 10 shows, and the other 5 days he'd play golf. And I thought, man, that's not a bad way to make a buck. So I went to Noel Rubloff, my agent, Abrams Rubloff, and I said, Noel, you know, I really love Password, and I love game shows, and I love playing games. And I said, would you send me on a game show audition to, you know, as a host? And so he did. He sent me on a few. And I got a local show on Channel 5 called What's the Name of That Song, which became later my first network game show. The title was, to fit TV Guide, was shortened to What's This Song? Only lasted a year, but it got me started in game shows. And since then, I've either produced or hosted 21 different game shows.
Of all the game shows that you've either produced and or hosted, is Tic-Tac-Dough probably the most popular?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I did that for almost 12 years. And Tic-Tac-Dough, you know, people say, what do you like? Which one did you like the best? And I said, the one that gave me the longest term of employment. The old check became a regular thing, you know. And we get used to those, right, David?
Right, exactly.
So I would say tic-tac-dough, but I love the game too. It's very simple. And I think the reason it was so successful, as are most game shows, it was easy to understand. You get 3 X's, 3 O's, diagonally, vertically, horizontally, and you win.
Now, you've also developed game shows. What are the secret ingredients to a good game show?
Simplicity. I think that if you look at the game shows that have been successful over the years, Let's Make a Deal. You know, what's behind door number 1, 2, or 3? I mean, there are ways of getting there, but essentially that's it. You know, and you look at Jeopardy. I'll give you the answer. You give me the question. I think that's the best. In my view, that's the best format ever, because it's so simple. And God bless Merv Griffin for coming up with probably the most successful game show of all time in Jeopardy. And Wheel of Fortune, there's another one. You know, the old Hangman game. And we all played Hangman as a kid. And Merv again made a successful game out of that. Simplicity. I could go on and on. Match Game. Family Feud. Look how simple they are. I've always said this too. You can have a successful game show with a successful host. But if you don't have a successful game, you can have the best host in the world. I don't care whether it's Alex Trebek or Pat Sajak or Bob Barker or you name it. They can't make a bad show a hit. So you got to have a basic format that people are going to like, and the simpler the better.
What do you think of the resurgence of all these game shows in prime time?
Well, I think it's good. You know, I've always felt like, I mean, game shows have been around since the days of radio. And then television came along, and we've always had successful games on television. And they go away for a while. Even at Game Show Network, they'll take successful classic games, play them for a while, then shelve them. And then a couple of years later, bring them back, put them on the air again. Game shows are basic entertainment for people. People at home like to watch other people win. And as a host, I've always felt, boy, what a great feeling. You know, you get to give away somebody else's money. Don't cost you a dime. It's like being Santa Claus. And once you got them hooked, they'll come back time and time and time again.
On a personal note, I've known you and Sandy for several decades now. And I was thinking last night, I can't remember one time that we've been together that the two of you weren't together.
Yeah.
I really can't. I'm sure back in the days that we were doing Headline Chasers, you were on the set by yourself without her there, but I don't remember those days.
She would always be there for the tapings. I mean, Sandy and I don't know, we never get tired of each other. I can't imagine my life without Sandy. That's how much I love her. And every year that we're together, I seem to love her more. And I think she feels the same way. And I've never met anybody who didn't like my Sandy. She's like my little Cupid doll. She could talk to the wall and make it seem interesting. People love her. And I've never met anybody that didn't enjoy her. And of course, that same here.
So what is it about the two of you? What is it that works?
I think it's, first of all, it starts with our belief in God. She was born in a Christian home. I was born and raised in a Christian home. When your wife gives you the kind of excitement you enjoy, whether it's going to a movie, whether it's going to a restaurant, whatever you're doing, when you enjoy doing everything with your spouse, it makes life so pleasurable. And that's the way it is with us. And I've had other people say to me, you know, every time I see you with Sandy, or vice versa. And that's just we love to do everything together. I'm currently doing a faith-based soap opera. And she's there for all the taping. She sits in the studio and watches me do my scenes and helps me run my lines when I'm at home. And, you know, it's a team thing. It's a team thing.
Looking back on your career, looking back on your life, what are you the most grateful about?
Wow, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. It's powerful. I think that I'm most grateful for the fact that I've known since I was a little boy what I wanted to do professionally with my life. And the fact that I was a believer and was raised in a Christian home just underlined the fact that I was making the right decision. Tell you a quick story while I'm on this subject. I had my favorite radio shows when I was a kid. One was Gene Autry, Melody Ranch. Every Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock, I'd tune in Melody Ranch on the radio. Little did I know that years later, I would be working for the man in the white hat at KMPC. And I remember the day I signed my contract there, in walked Gene Autry. And it was like an out-of-body experience. Another show that I never failed to listen to was on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. Mr. District Attorney, champion of the people, guardian of our fundamental rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I still remember the introduction. This is how impressed I was. And it shall be my duty as District Attorney not only to prosecute to the limits of the law all persons accused of crimes perpetrated within this county, but to defend with equal vigor the rights and privileges of all its citizens. And the music. Bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, ba-da, da, 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 da. Now, you're talking to a guy who sometimes can't remember his own name, but I was listening to this Mr. District Attorney radio show in the 1940s, and I still remember all of that. Lynn Doyle as Harrington, Vicky Vola as Miss Miller, and Jay Justin was the actor in the title role. Another quick story. I'm at KFWB doing the morning show as a rock jock. Every morning I'd get off the air and a bunch of us promo guys would have breakfast at Aldo's, little coffee shop downstairs. And every day this man would go walking by with his cane, and somebody, one of the promo guys, found out. They knew my story about Mr. District Attorney. They found out that guy, that elderly gentleman who was crippled, was Jay Justin, who played the title role of Mr. District Attorney when I was a kid. And the guys would always say, why don't you go out and tell him your story and say hello to him? He'll appreciate that. I said, I'm not going to bother him. I said, he'll be bored to death. They kept at it. And finally one day I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. So I got up from my eggs and coffee, and I went out in front of Aldo's as he's walking by. And I said, excuse me, Mr. Justin? Yes. He had this mellifluous tones. Yes. I said, my name is Wink Martindale. You don't know me from Adam. I said, I am a DJ. I do a radio show upstairs at KFWB. And I said, I just want you to know how much your program and you influenced me being in this business that I'm in. And this business that's done so much for me and made me such a good living. Well, he was totally fascinated. And he said to me, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And I said, well, yes, sir. So we went in and sat over in a corner in Aldo's coffee shop. And he regaled me with stories of classic radio days. And I was totally mesmerized. And I was so glad that I did that day, Dave, because in 2 weeks he was dead. He died 2 weeks, almost to the day after we had coffee, and he told me those stories.
Our radio show is all about the power of stories and the power of sharing and the ripple effect that a story can have, and that's why we call it contagious encouragement. You know, so much of life, you know, God gives us these incredible stories to share. We keep them to ourselves, or sometimes we keep them until it's too late. You know, looking back on your life and you see how God's connected the dots for you, starting with Dot Records, right? Now, God's connected the dots for you. And it's so interesting to look backwards, because when we look forwards, we have these grandiose ideas and we don't know what's coming around the corner. But when we look backwards, you can sort of see not only the pattern, but you can see how sort of the grand architect really did have a plan for you, right?
Absolutely. And it's so interesting to me because I often think, and I have this conversation with others, that looking back over your career is so much more interesting, especially if you've enjoyed some measure of success, is so much more interesting than looking ahead. Because looking ahead, you don't know what the future will bring. But it's so much fun looking back because when I was a kid growing up in Jackson, Tennessee, and at 17 with my first radio job, and then when I went to Memphis and I went through the 1950s, was there the night Elvis was discovered, was at Sun Records when Sam Phillips enjoyed success with Carl Perkins and Johnny Cash and Roy Orbison and all those people. Those were such special days. And that's why I think about the 50s right now as we speak, David, as my favorite decade, because I didn't know what I was experiencing at that. I didn't know it was all that special. Now I look back on it and I thought, wow, I was a part of the changing of the guard in popular music. I mean, that night in July of 1954, music changed literally almost overnight. The following year, we had Blackboard Jungle. We had Rock Around the Clock, Bill Haley and the Comets. And by 1956, with Heartbreak Hotel, the first million seller by Elvis, we were well into the coming of the Everly Brothers out of Nashville and that version of country rock. And we were that was such a wellstream of popular music. And that decade, where we went from 1950 and Rosemary Clooney and Perry Como to 1959, when we first heard of Bobby Darin and Splish Splash and Mac the Knife, into the 60s, thanks to American Bandstand with Dick Clark, all of those years were so special. And I look back on them now, and they are super, super special. But at the time, when you're living them, you're just making your living. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was going in every morning doing a morning show, and I was going in on Saturdays doing a dance party for Coca-Cola. I didn't know how special those days were, but they were. And they're so much fun to look back on now. You look at your days when you first came out here with King World. You know, who knew where King World was going from Dick Colbert to King World, and the fact that their father had been successful and that they were going to change the course of syndication as we had known it.
Well,
and you were part of that.
I always tell people when I got out here, I mean, at that time, King World had a book value, I think, of $4 million. You know, the only real asset was the Little Rascals.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember walking. First of all, it took me 3 weeks to find Michael King out here. But
and it's too bad that all of our listeners didn't have the opportunity to know the Michael King we're talking about, because he was truly one of a kind.
Oh, he was amazing. He and Roger, they were by far the world's greatest salesmen. I mean,
no question.
The things that they taught me that I have used decades since in launching projects, launching shows, have just been you could not buy that kind of education. They were just phenomenal. I mean, they truly were the Barnum and Bailey, the real true showman that you just don't have today.
I used to live across the street from Michael and his wife Barbara at the time in Malibu, in an area called Sarah Retreat, back off of Pacific Coast Highway. And every night he would want me to come over and drink with him. You know, and I lived across the street. And so, you know, I was still trying to sell shows in those days, and he was representing in syndication my one show that I'd sold to Merv Griffin called Headline Chasers. And so I wanted to do everything I could to ingratiate myself with him. So I made the mistake early on of trying to keep up with him drink by drink by drink. And by midnight or 1 o'clock, you know, I mean, he was a Scotch drinker from the word go. And when he finished his drink, he expected you to drink another drink with
Right,
him.
exactly.
And if we hadn't sold our home to George C. Scott, he bought our home from. If we hadn't sold our home when we did and moved back to the city and gotten away from Michael, I'd have probably been dead a long time ago
Well, I will
from alcoholism.
I will tell you that, Michael used to have me come out there all the time. He had that wing with the guest rooms, and I think I had my own name on the door. I mean, it was like, because we would leave the office, he'd say, "Oh, come out and stay with me tonight," and I knew what that meant. That meant come out and drink with him tonight.
Yeah.
And he would always have somebody he was pulling out. It was the sports star or the B movie star or somebody.
Yeah.
Somebody that and you knew that you were going to have to sit through the same stories.
Yeah.
About his dad finding the little rascals and the whole thing. So, and you got used to that. But Michael would, back in those days, I don't know if you remember what 7 and 7. What was that? That was vodka and orange juice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Michael would pour me vodka and orange juice, right, at 1:00 in the morning. And I'm thinking to myself, I did not move out here to drink like this. I'm going to die, right? So Michael would, of course, get up and go to the bathroom, and I would dump out the drink that he just made me and put orange juice in there, right?
Yeah.
And I would sit there and drink orange juice all night long, because he'd go to the bathroom like every 20 minutes or whatever, and I would dump out the alcohol and just put it. I was the healthiest guy in Hollywood. Yeah, I mean, I went through the orange juice like there was. I think I went through all the oranges. Well, Wink, this has been fun. It's so great to finally sit down and have this chat with you, and I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your friendship and Sandy's friendship, and I just appreciate you being such a wonderful influence on American entertainment and culture all these years. And just keep up the good work. I know you're as busy as ever, and just keep it up.
I use a line that Art Linkletter used for years, David. People still to this day say, "Do you ever think about retiring?" And Art used to answer that with this phrase. He'd say, "Retire from what? Hell, I'm not tired." So as long as, people like the ones who are who've hired me to be a minister on Hilton Head Island come to me, or KFC comes to me and want me to be a part of their commercial, as long as people want me to do what I do, it's a pleasure to do it. And I still enjoy doing what I do as much as ever. It's never diminished. As you get older, you don't get as many opportunities, but I'm still producing, so I'm still selling shows. So it's been a wonderful pleasure over the years. And again, to you, David. And
thank you. On that note, let's go have a drink. Come on, I'm not helping you.
David, you have to. Big guy. Earl Jones. Earl Jones. Is that it? Is it Earl Jones? Earl Rawls. Earl. David, you have to help me.
You know what? I'm going to let you look it up.
Just give me the initial. I don't need to look it up.
Go ahead.
What's his initial? What's the last name start with? That's all I need. Rawls? Earl Rawls?
Lou Rawls.
That's the wrong. I cannot. And Mike Rose, another great voice that you always know.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
Can you believe that Winker?
The Winker, man. That was incredible.
Oh my gosh. I want to tell you something. The fact that he was the guy that was there when Elvis was brought to the studio in Memphis after his record was played over and over and over and over again that night. And that's the night that music was changed forever.
Forever. I mean, I remember where I was at 10 years old when Elvis died. That's how huge we all know the King was. And Wink was part of that whole, even to be in the same room with Elvis. I mean, you just want to touch him.
Yeah.
He was there. And
And Sandy, of course, dated Elvis.
yes.
So,
And the Winker took her away from Elvis,
Oh,
from the
yeah.
kid.
Can
That's
you
saying a
believe
lot
that?
about the Winker.
Oh, my
I mean, let's
gosh.
be honest here. Who can take a woman away from the king? Well, the Winker did.
Well, I will tell you, he is the nicest guy. He is one of the most genuine, authentic guys you'll ever meet, as is Sandy. What a wonderful couple. You know, he came from that era when radio was king. I mean, it really was.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
He came from that era of all the greats, you know, Sinatra and Tony Bennett and
In my opinion, the best music in our
in the history
lifetime.
of lifetimes.
You know what else I love, though, too, is that he and his wife do everything together.
Yeah.
I love that their marriage is a team effort, and they recognize that it's not about one or the other, it's about both of them. That, to me, is a testament. So go Sandy. It's getting stolen by the Winker.
Here's the other really cool thing. Did I ever tell you how I met Wink and
No.
Sandy?
Mm-mm.
Well, when I joined King World back in the 80s, I got to Hollywood. I had never had a drink before in my life.
How old were you?
I was in my 20s.
Okay.
And I was staying at a hotel on Rodeo Drive that the company had put me up, and they were to pay my hotel bill. And back those days, you know, when you got a hotel, you like signed a thing saying you'd pay or something. I
Right.
mean, it wasn't like it is now. Now they take money out of your bank account
Before you even sleep there.
It's
Yeah.
just all kinds of crazy stuff. But back then it wasn't like that. So I stayed at this hotel, and the president of our company was to come and pay my hotel bill, but he wouldn't do it. You know, he was always busy.
Uh-huh.
And so after about 3 weeks, they were going to kick me out of the place.
Well, okay, that makes sense.
So finally, I got Michael King to come down to the hotel one night after work, and we went to the front desk, and he saw a bar next to the lobby, right? And he said, "Hey, before I pay your bill, let's go and have a drink." And I'm like, "Can we just pay the bill, Michael?" And he goes, "No, you're having a drink
You
with
didn't
me."
want to say, I've never had a drink. Were you too embarrassed to say that?
You know, I just, yeah.
Because those days, everybody had a drink and a cigarette in their hand.
Well, those days, people were doing all kinds of things, you know, and
But in public, you always saw people with a drink. I mean, these guys did this on stage while they were performing.
yeah. So we went into the bar, and Michael said, "What do you have?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'll have a Coke." You know.
Not the kind of drink that he meant.
Well, of course, back in those days, when you say you'll have Coke, you
Bring
know.
out white powder. I didn't say we don't do that here.
Well, that wasn't the case in this case, but he said, "What do you have?" And I said, I have a Coke." And he says, no, a drink. I'm like, "Oh, well, you know, isn't a Coke? No, an alcoholic drink, right?" So he said, "You know, you have alcohol." And I said, "Well, honestly, I didn't know the difference between scotch and bourbon or vodka or
Right.
anything. I had no clue.
I still don't.
I had zero clue. As far as I was concerned, it was just like it was a different color of licorice. You know, I mean, I had
right.
no idea. So he ordered a scotch on the rocks, and I said, "Well, I'll have the same." You know, I was trying to act cool, right? Yeah,
This is a great story. Is it going to get back to Wink?
yeah.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
said, "Yeah, let me wink." So I had a drink with him, and then I had about 10 of those. I lost count.
Oh my gosh.
So then Michael says, "Hey, let's go pay your bill, and I'm taking you to dinner and to meet a friend of mine." And I said, "Okay." Maybe I said, "Okay." I probably said,
You probably don't remember what you
okay,
said.
okay. Yeah. So we paid the bill, and we took a cab to a restaurant in Century City. And at that point, he introduced me to Wink and Sandy Martindale.
Huh.
We were at a steakhouse, a Century City steakhouse there.
So their first impression of you was you were wasted.
Yeah.
And the friendship has lasted 30 years.
So what happened is that I ended up making my way down to the wine cellar, and I found a restroom, an employee restroom down near the wine cellar. I flushed my glasses down the commode. I was totally like,
Wasted.
wasted.
Yeah.
And then we left the restaurant, and Wink and Sandy gave us a ride back to the hotel
Because they had to.
because they had to. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in the back of Wink and Sandy's car with Michael, and I'm like,
Oh my gosh. You did
and
not.
Michael's like, David, you will not throw up in the Winker's car. You will not throw up in the Winker's car. And I'm like,
Oh. Or were you doing this? Oh, I am your father.
So, so I get to the hotel, and all I remember is the next morning, or a couple hours later, I hear ding, 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 and it was the elevator. Dinging.
Yeah.
Somebody was coming out of the elevator at like 6 a.m.
Oh.
I had not made it in my room. I passed out right outside of my hotel room door.
Oh
right?
my gosh.
And I'm like, oh my.
They didn't even try to make sure you got in your room and put you to bed.
No.
You just
They
said
just dropped
bye.
me
Wait-
off.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
that
well,
was my that's the first time I met Wink and Sandy in Hollywood. That night is as vivid as you can imagine, and my life was forever changed.
And a friendship began.
It really did. You know what? It gives us a good laugh. I mean, I was literally a kid back then. I was in my 20s.
You were green, never drank. You had 10 drinks.
Right, a preacher's kid from Ohio.
Yeah. What an
And all of a sudden,
initiation.
I'm in Hollywood. Well, that's what Michael King told me. He, when I got into my room,
Uh-huh.
I fell on the bed, and about 6 hours later, at like noon, I get a call from Michael King, and I'm like, and he's like, David, where are you? Where are you? And I'm like, all I can think of is I'm going to get fired. I didn't show up for work. But I'm like, Michael, I just decided to work out of the hotel today. And he starts laughing. And he goes, ha, ha. I really broke you into Hollywood last night, didn't I? And that was my entree. That was my,
Yeah, it was your first time laying eyes on Wink and Sandy Martindale
that was it.
when you were wasted.
That was
But at
it.
least you remember it.
Well, the really fun thing today is that we look back on those days fondly.
Yeah.
And we have all these crazy stories. Of course, they've got millions. I mean, I'm so glad that Wink had the opportunity to share some of them today. And I will just say I've lived. If a cat has 9 lives, I've lived 11 of them.
Definitely.
I mean, I have always appreciated the fact that I have this incredible encyclopedia of life that I've lived.
Mm-hmm.
That it hasn't just been one dimensional.
Right.
And, for a preacher's kid from Ohio, going into that environment was literally being put into the lion's den.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah. Can you imagine today's time? That was back then. How it is today in today's time? How different?
I think today it's probably more, there's probably more terror from a mindset standpoint. I mean, if I was today where I was back then,
Right.
It may
You'd be crucified, David.
It may be politically incorrect to say this, but the idea back then is that I'm going to kiss her tonight, right? I think we like each other, and I'm going to get right.
Yeah.
And it's like I can't imagine being in that situation now. I
telling
mean, it's like you have to get a permission slip,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
Yeah. But it's also the stands that you take with your faith and with your political stand, you would never, ever be accepted.
Well, no, I would
if you were just beginning in Hollywood today.
I would be.
You'd be ostracized before you even got there.
Yeah, I absolutely would be. But there are great people like Wink and Sandy, believers in Hollywood, who have kept the faith out there. Mark and Roma.
And they recognize
Kevin
who the
Sorbo
grand
and
architect
Sam Sorbo.
is. Yep.
There are a lot of great believers in Hollywood.
Yeah, they really are.
There really are. I mean, the media loves. Oh, look, that spider just came down and almost got me in the head. Thank you for rescuing
You're
me.
welcome.
Man, look at now it's running. It ran into the. We have a spider on the loose here in the studio.
Yeah, I just
It's
saw
running
him
your
coming
way
down.
now. I saw it going over there.
Oh, great. You didn't kill
Okay,
it?
let's call the exterminator.
I had to say something. I was about to get on your nose. Yeah, they're great people. I love how they recognize who the grand architect of their life is. And like you said, like many believers in Hollywood do. And maybe they can't be as vocal about them until they get to a certain point in their career. And I think now that Wink is there, he's like, all bets are off.
Yeah.
I've paid my dues. I've been successful. This is what I have done. And here's who I am. And if you don't like it, then you don't have to listen.
Absolutely. Well, it's been great having you here today.
It's been great being here.
I wish we could do it more often.
I do too. I love doing it. I love being here with you, hanging out.
When's your show debut?
Not sure. Don't have the date yet. It's coming very soon. I'll be able to announce it.
Coming this fall.
In the spirit of Wink Martindale, the Winker, let's go out with our deep voices.
Okay.
All right.
It's been great being here, David. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it too.
Oh my gosh, are you sure that we're not like? There must be something in this coffee.
Well, I think there is.
I'm not drinking
Isn't
my.
that your CBD coffee?
I'm not drinking my CBD coffee today, but maybe I need to.
It feels like you are.
Okay, we're out of here. We've been out of here for a while. We've been out of here for a while. This is just becoming too much fun.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having too much fun. Thanks for having me. I can't wait to come back.
All right, we'll see you next time here on CI. Hey, by the way,
Yeah.
I did not tell people to go out and live life and live in color because it sure is a lot more fun than living in black and white.
Actually, you just did.
I did.
You did.
Well, then go do it. See you later.